And then Robin, kidnapped, raped, murdered. He's now in his third death sentence for that. Hasn't been executed yet. Now, wouldn't you think somewhere along there somebody would get a clue and say, you know, this is not a candidate for probation or parole? I mean, and it's got to drive you guys crazy, Lonnie, to do all of the work, Tony, to do all the work to get the convictions, get the prosecutions, and then they damn near beat you out the courthouse door back onto the street. How do you feel about that?
Well, especially in this Alcala case, the fact that 2 death penalty verdicts have been overturned is just shocking to me. I mean, what those justices were thinking when they decided, you know what, we're going to worry this much about one little thing that might have been prejudicial to the defendant. You know, the first turnover, the first reversal was because the court allowed Talia to testify that Alcala had beat her and raped her, just like supposedly he had done in the case that was being tried, Robin's case. And the judges said, oh, that's not fair to Mr. Alcala. That's too prejudicial to him. That's not fair. So, you know, let's start all over again. I mean, that's the kind of reversals that happen in this case. And it's like, what else can the prosecutors do? It's like the worse they are, the more we're kept from actually putting on in front of the jury. And I'll tell you, I've talked to jurors afterwards, and they find out that there have been court rulings where certain evidence was not put in front of them, and they feel like they've been betrayed by the system. They're like, why didn't we know this man was a real monster? We were kept from thinking, oh, he only did this one crime when he's done 5 crimes like this. And yet that's the way some of the laws are written, and that's the way some of the judges rule.
Nathan, that's where the legislation has to change, right?
Absolutely, and this is the problem. I mean, we hit it right on the head earlier. We have a whole series of laws, but there's clearly gaps in the system because John Gardner, sexually violent predator on a child, he got 6 years, of which he did 5. Everybody was warned before he was released. The psychological evaluation said he is callous, he has no remorse, he will reoffend. And they still let him out on parole. While he was on parole, he violated his parole 7 times. Any one of those violations could have sent him back under more stringent guidelines, under a more stringent evaluation, and could have kept him in prison. And the system failed, and so it's time for a full review of all of the laws.
All right, now, he violated his probation 7 times, and among those violations was putting himself in proximity
to a preschool.
To a preschool.
A preschool.
And that's what drives me crazy about this. And understand that when we say that the full 10 years was recommended, that came from a psychiatrist.
That's right.
Now, psychiatrists are usually on the other side. They're usually people that say, look, let me treat this person. Let me help this person. Let me put them in a system and heal them and cure them and put them out. When a psychiatrist steps up and says, you need to put that person in and throw the key away.
Gotta listen.
Let me tell you, that should speak volumes to the court, if not to the jury, because the court knows how rare that situation is. We should be outraged about this, folks. I'm telling you, we should be outraged about this. And the people that we vote for work for us. And they need to understand that you need to support keeping us safe, or you're not going to get our vote. It's just that simple. So, yeah, please, Dave.
Let me just add one thing. You know, you talk about the cruelty that this poor family has gone through.
The one thing that always sticks in my head is before he was given a second appeal, Mrs. Sampson, Robin's mother got a call from the San Quentin prison, death row. Rodney's number 9 on the list to be executed. How many relatives do you want there? And it was less than what, Robert, 2 months later?
It was less than 4 days.
Less than 4 days later came the word. He's getting a new trial, second case overturned.
And actually, Dave, I think you're the one who called us to tell us.
I called your mother to tell us.
Our legislation and our people didn't call to tell us that. It was media. And could you imagine what my mom went through when she just went through the high of we might see the execution this year, and 4 days later, Dave's calling not about the execution, but making your plans ready for another trial. Our system's just so broken.
That's Clint?
You make the point, Dr. Phil, that, okay, we want to lock these people up. And I think we're all in agreement. We don't want these guys to get a second chance at our daughters, our wives, our sisters, our brothers. We don't want them out there again. Well, folks, we got to pay for that, too. you know, the bottom line is we got to pay for it. But look, we're the United States. We got a lot of money going around this world, and I don't know of a better place than getting predators off the street and supporting prosecutors and telling our legislators, we will back you, you pass these laws, and we will sign the checks to put these guys away. So we got to do it together, but as Americans, we got to demand better. We have to demand better.
And this is an important point because you always hear this, especially in California. You always hear, well, we don't have enough money, there's a budget crisis. What is government there to do if not protect the innocent and protect our children? There's a lot of things the state of California does that are optional, and this is not one of the things that's optional. This is mandatory. And the other thing you'll hear is everyone will tell you why you can't do it. Oh, you can't do it because of this. Oh, you can't track them because of that. This is my favorite when you talk about GPS monitoring. Oh, you can't do it. The technology doesn't exist. We put a man on the moon 40 years ago. FedEx and UPS track 30 million packages a day globally. We can do it. It's just not convenient, or it's not a high enough priority, and that's what has to change.
And we've got a federal database. Can't we take all of this DNA that is collected every time somebody is arrested for anything and put it into the system so New York can talk to Oregon, they can talk to Florida, they can talk to Oklahoma?
That's one of the things we miss right now. As an FBI agent, when I arrest you, I take your fingerprints. But I can't take your DNA. There has to be a clearly definable crime for me to take the DNA. Look, folks, if a law enforcement officer can arrest you, he ought to be able to take your DNA. The National DNA Data Bank has got about 9 million people in it, where the latent fingerprint has got about 150 million.
Well, if fingerprints are taken to identify someone and DNA is taken to identify someone, what is the law saying? You can sort of identify somebody, but not too well?
And I think the law, I think we were talking about this, and I think the law is basically, there are organizations that feel it's intrusive to take your DNA, but it's not intrusive because of history to take your fingerprints. We ought to be able to march somebody in there, take those 10 fingerprints, take that DNA swab. Look, there are 20,000 unidentified dead bodies in America right now. If we had that DNA taken, we'd know who they are. There are tens of thousands of unidentified crimes. If we had that DNA, those people would be off the street, and you and your family and everyone else wouldn't have to worry about another offender out there doing this all over again. We would have his DNA, he would be behind bars, and we wouldn't see that guy out there stalking, looking through the fence at the school ground at our children, trying to pick out another 8-year-old victim.
You know, Dr. Phil.
Go ahead.
I think that these two things are really key in the next step in really being able to protect society, the GPS tracking and the DNA database. You know, in the 70s, when Alcala was doing these murders, we didn't even have DNA admissible in court. We couldn't even use it in court. And so they would collect it, but it just sat there. Nobody even used it. It was in the late 80s and 90s that we fought to be able to actually admit DNA evidence in front of juries, and the courts finally said, okay. But we still didn't have a database. We didn't have anything to match it up to. Now, slowly, states are starting to build up these databases. And what we need to do is push to get it either taken at time of arrest, or even we were talking about at time when people go get their driver's license. And people say, well, that's an intrusion. Well, if you're not committing crimes, what does it matter? It's not going to hurt you.
Well, okay. Well, we are out of time now, but I wanted to have this additional discussion, and I thank you guys for weighing in on it. Thank you guys for participating. We really appreciate it.